Mindcage is Silence of the Lambs, except Hannibal Lecter is a wizard.
Oh, 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 it's magic.
I had never even heard of the 2022 crime suspense thriller Mindcage. And for good reason, because this film is so drainingly boring for 92% of its runtime, and then the other 8% is just batshit insanity. So this film is about a serial killer played by John Malkovich, who is known as the Artist. Now, he is in prison for the last 5 years for committing various acts of serial killing. Anyway, as he'd been in prison, there's been a series of copycat killers, and a young detective, Mary, her cop partner, Jake, who was the one who initially arrested John Malkovich's character. They are basically sent to go and work with John Malkovich to try and find out who the copycat killer is. So it's kind of like a Silence of the Lambs situation with, the cop partner Jake just sitting in his car, shaking his head at the whole damn situation, and, Mary just going in to try and, coax as much information out of him as possible. So this movie was extremely boring. You don't really learn anything about Mary except that she doesn't report the fact the glove compartment of he has a series of medications and books on exorcisms in the glove compartment of his cop car, and she doesn't report that. That's the only thing you really know about Detective Mary, and that she doesn't want to go and visit her dying dad for some reason. Jake's a bit more complex. He's just clearly struggling with some issues. He's a bit obsessed with the occult and the demonology of angels because of his experience with John Malkovich's character. But aside from that, you learn nothing about basically these people, what they like, what they don't like, their quirks, their personality. You do learn that Mary has a very, very creepy husband. Yeah, and who just stares into the distance and prays at crosses, and it's all very ominous. Could he have something to do with this religious serial killer that's going on right now? Food for thought. So basically, it's a very, very much of a rip-off of Silence of the Lambs. It's the artist is quid pro quo, Clarice. Fly, 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 give me my art supplies and I'll help you catch the copycat killer. And yeah, and so he gains his art supplies, and then we basically have to try and figure out what's going on. There's this hilarious scene where basically they're running out of time to go and save this victim, and the artist goes, I'll tell you where he is if you just pose for me for 10 minutes. And she's like, fine, I'll do it for 10 minutes. And then he's like, tell me about your childhood. And it is such a rip-off of Silence of the Lambs. And then in that 10 minutes, the artist, just out of random bits of clay, just makes this masterpiece sculpture that would probably take a normal person an hour. Anyway, he so he just asks her about her past, and you find out issues with religion because her dad used to burn his hand in a fire and say, this is what hell's like. And it's jinx. The movie, there's just lots of weird things that happen. There's a bit of spooky dooky, is there demons involved? Her husband just one day Mary just wakes up in the middle of the night and she's awoken, and she realizes her husband isn't next to her. In fact, he's sitting across the room staring at her with dead eyes and a cross in his hand. And he's allegedly couldn't sleep, so he just started praying. And then Mary closes her eyes in a really sheepish way and goes back to sleep, and it's that was a bit off-putting. And of course, he the serial killer knows so much about her life. So how does the artist know all this? Could he be in cahoots with the copycat? And then it's okay, you need to go and find out where the copycat killer is. He gives her the address inside the sculpture that he's made of her. Which she just takes as well. That was so funny to me that she just took it with her. She didn't just chuck it in the bin outside. But yeah, so when they get there, it's revealed that Jake was the copycat all along because, and just, you'll never guess, the artist, John Malkovich, has superpowers. if he draws a picture of someone and he holds a bit of paper, he basically becomes them. He can possess them. And so he's been possessing the cop and basically killing people as what doing his mission through him. And it's like, oh my god, this is the stupidest thing ever. It was like so entertaining and out of the blue. It was hilarious. The only ever kind of aspect, like I genuinely believed that he was like supposed to be some like genius, like you know, mentalist guy, like with amazing psychiatric abilities, like Hannibal Lecter, like, you know, because apparently Jake's cop friend and partner who died when they both arrested John Malkovich after, you know, he got caught for serial killing. He doused himself in fire and set himself on fire. And I assumed it was because the artist got inside his head, but no, he genuinely got inside his body via possession. It's just such a wild like twist, and it was so funny. So yeah, obviously, you know, Mary has to shoot Jake, and she's like, I'm so sorry about this. And then she basically goes home and she like says goodbye to her. She goes and actually speaks to her dad off screen, and she's at the funeral with her husband, who, you know, like, it makes so much sense. He's actually what is revealed when they're doing their whole Clarice and like Hannibal Lecter thing for the 10 minutes when she's posing for the sculpture, was the fact that she married like the priest at the local church who she confessed to. It was like the artist twist of the entire movie, because you're like, that's why he was doing all that religious stuff. Like, it was almost too like obvious that he was going to be a serial killer. Like we learn nothing about him other than he liked to occasionally like stare creepily into the distance and pray. But this made sense. He'd given up his job to like to marry her, and he was clearly just having some issues. He was just wanting to do some praying. It was like, oh, it was like the smartest, stupidest thing that happened in the whole movie. But yeah, so she's with her priest husband, her ex-priest husband, and they're at the funeral, and then this guy who was like the warden at the artist's like prison, he shows up, and she goes over to speak to him, and it's revealed that he has actually been possessed by the artist, who now says through this guy, oh, I'm coming after you next. And then Mary Kelly brings, like, you know, she does our kind of a 100 IQ move, and she goes, did you draw the picture of the guy with those black charcoal pencils? And he's like, oh, and she's like, because I doused them in ricin, the poison that you've been using to kill your victims. So, goodbye. And then, luckily, of course, he did use that pencil, not a different one. But then he goes, like, back to his own body, and he's like, oh my god, I've been poisoned. And the final shot is of Mary and her ex-priest boyfriend, husband, saying, let's go to Rome on holiday, and then drifting off into the sunset in their car, whilst like the warden just like kind of wakes up after his possession in the middle of like a graveyard going, huh? Where was I? And that was this craziest, like, it was such a nuts movie, like, for like 8% of it. Like, the mass majority of this movie is boring and like dull, and just, it's like there's no like excitement or tension. It's just like, it was like such a movie that you'd watch just like playing on your phone and just praying for it to end. But then that last like couple minutes, it was just absolutely freaking nuts. Thanks for watching this video. I'm recording this at like 11 o'clock at night, just because I just wanted to get this all off my chest. Oh, one more thing. The artist, like, he needs a bit of paper or whatever to like do this, and he's had this for years, in a bit of paper to do his, like, you know, possession. So how the hell did he commit the first 2 murders as the copycat through the guy if he didn't have any of his art supplies, which included the portrait of the cop, Jake? So that's some other unsolved questions. But do you know what? Nobody blooming cares after watching this. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.